All right, welcome everybody to the Waconia Wrestling Live podcast. Again, this is your host, Jeff Catherman. And tonight we have another kind of interview series. And tonight we're going to be focusing on wrestling parents. This is one of my favorite topics and areas of, this is an educational journey that we're all on in the sport of wrestling. And so I think tapping into wrestling parent experiences and navigating the sport, best practices is what we're going to talk about tonight. Some stories, some testimonials, and I've got Mike and Jessica Cook from our youth program. I want to say welcome, Mike and Jessica. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing well. How are you, Jeff?
Good. I want to say thanks again. I'm going to try to set the record for thank yous on both of you joining me here on Sunday night, especially on short notice. But sometimes how we fly by the seat of our pants here in the Waconia Wrestling Media team. But appreciate you guys joining. I'm looking really forward to the discussion tonight. Before we get into that, shameless plug for tomorrow, our annual free youth wrestling clinic and open house for all those pre-K age 4 and up to 6th grade wrestlers, boys and girls. Come out to Waconia High School tomorrow night. We're going to get started about 7 o'clock. We're going to have a kind of beginner clinic in the main gym. And then for those that are kind of a part of our program for the last couple of years, the older kids, we'll have a breakout practice and workout with the high school coaches. And we're really excited. We've got Coach Jake Avery going to run the beginner group in the main gym. And then we're also going to have a little bit of an open house of sorts of Q&A and information about the program. And then we'll have a pizza party at 8 o'clock when it all wraps up. So please come to that. And this is a part of our outreach for that event. So with that, we're going to get back to Mike and Jessica. For this audience, for those that don't know you, you're relatively new to the program. Give us a little bit of background on both of you and how you kind of came across our program.
All right. So I started wrestling in middle school, small town in Wisconsin. Wrestled for a couple years into the high school program, and then there just were not enough people that were going out for it, so they cut our program, unfortunately. So that was kind of my experience, just when things were really starting to flow and I was getting pretty confident with wrestling, they were done with it. So that had been really about it as far as me wrestling until we moved to Waconia, going on almost 7 years ago. Had our 2 boys. Edward was playing basketball up until last year. Henry was kind of the aggressive one. They both had done karate before. And we watched Henry square up on his older brother and kind of took it to him a little bit. So we thought, why not see what happens? So we started talking to some of the other parents during baseball. We didn't know that they had started wrestling already in kindergarten. Had no idea. Started talking to some of the parents, and they said, there's this clinic that's going on. You guys should check it out. And that's kind of how it started for us, was Henry.
Yeah, and Henry was really the one that was like, yeah, I want to try that. And we were like, really? Oh, okay. Yeah. Like because Edward hadn't wrestled, right? There's that dynamic with brothers where like Edward had done baseball and Edward was doing basketball and Edward had done karate. And so for Henry to kind of approach us and be like, I want to try wrestling, we were like, well, okay, sure. I haven't done that one yet. So
yeah, the younger brothers and sisters, the siblings tend to follow what the oldest one is doing, right? So Henry's a little bit of a trailblazer.
Yes, definitely that.
Yeah.
Among many other adjectives, but
right.
To that a little bit.
A little bit.
And when you said baseball, was that in the fall or was that the previous spring?
That was in the fall. The summer going into the fall, and then we got into the flag football here in the fall. We had thought that Eddie was gonna play basketball still.
Yeah.
We took both boys to the clinic that's going to be going on tomorrow night. And Edward, seeing kids on the mat, was kind of rolling around, and all of a sudden after we got done, he's like, I think I want to try wrestling. We're like, you're a basketball player, you're not a wrestler. Your brother's the one who we thought we'd get into wrestling. And that's kind of how it all started.
And last year, Edward was 3rd grade.
Yes.
And Henry obviously kindergarten. So yeah, as specialized sports have become, 3rd grade is it's not ever too late, but it's, as the way things have been trending, it's later, right?
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
as
A little nervous with that.
And we did feel that dynamic a little bit, and this is maybe jumping ahead, but Henry being a kindergartner, he was on kind of the top with pre-K, and he was still young. And then Edward was a 3rd and 4th grader, so he was kind of bottom of the pile and a little bit later to, these kids had quite a few of them had more experience. And so we can talk more about the dynamics of personal growth and adversity and what have you. But it was interesting because Henry really did kind of lead the way, and Edward was one for once, kind of following his brother. And then as we got more into the season, there was additional dynamics that made it somewhat interesting as well.
Yeah, well, that's great. And what were some of the FAQs or the main questions you had that were maybe even heading into the clinic? I think the clinic is a huge edge that we have.
Yes.
And I encourage, even though we're giving away some of our secrets, for those youth programs out there that don't do a free clinic out there, it's one of our secret sauces in Waconia to get kids to actually understand what wrestling is all about. It's not, WWE SmackDown on a Friday night or whenever it is, Mondays. It's a little different.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think one of the other things too, and I'll speak kind of candidly, there was very little barrier to getting into the program because when we showed up to the clinic, you guys had a table that had, some donated singlets and shoes. And so it was very easy for us to get there. When the boys showed an interest, there was kind of a low cost threshold, because that was part of it, right? Like with every new sport, it's like, and he like, what do we need for a uniform, and what do we need for gear, and like, what are the the investments in kind of this new sport? And so for the boys to be like, yeah, I think I want to do this, and it's like, okay, and there's some shoes over here we can try, and we can kind of give this a go and see. And that's so much for Henry because he had really wanted to do that, but for Edward especially, we were still kind of thinking like, yeah, you'll try this and then you'll tell us you want to go back to basketball. So I will say that was really advantageous, and like we've got some gear we're bringing that the boys have outgrown back, and I think that'll also speak as we get into it just about the community and the family of wrestling, and like making it available and accessible to newbies and to new families and to people that want to try it. That was huge, that we were like, okay, we can try this, and it's pretty low risk. And so
Awesome. Yeah, we are hoping to continue that tradition tomorrow night. And I don't know if our we're planning as well. In addition, we'll have some free gear for those that want to just get that off the table. But we have a great partnership with Hustle and Heart Sports, which is the used vendor, kind of like a Play It Again Sports, but Hustle and Heart, which is downtown Waconia. Jenny Hunter and her husband run a great business there. You can find shoes for 10, 15, 20 bucks at the most. They do have some extra singlets and stuff there. We have a huge inventory of extra singlets. All kids will get a complimentary t-shirt, assuming they register by the deadlines. And headgear, it's recommended. It's not required. And we have some, you can buy headgear brand new for $25 and used for much less. So it's a very low cost of entry to it. And we'll have more information at the clinic tomorrow night for those that are checking out. It's one of our main questions. So I'm going to keep going here, but what were some of the other key factors that helped you decide, what put you over the edge? Like, yep, we're signing them up.
I think part of it was once we started talking to other parents, just how easy they were to approach and ask questions, because we didn't know how this program was going to go. Do you just practice? I mean, is this something where you go to tournaments? And all of the other parents who have been doing this for a little while, they could see the hesitation, and maybe not even a hesitation, but just we were a little bit nervous as to how things were going to go. And I mean, parents definitely could sense that and answered every question that we had. And, as far as taking it as little or as far as we wanted to take it, what the expectations were, which is really not much. You just show up at the practices. If your kids wanted to do the tournaments, I mean, all those questions were asked for us, or answered for us, I guess I should say.
Right.
I think also just the excitement of the boys, you know, to one of your earlier questions, Mike had some experience with wrestling. My experience with wrestling was that I knew it existed. Like didn't come from a wrestling family. I'd never been to a wrestling tournament, even of like a friend in high school. I mean, so I had nothing. I mean, I knew that there was like these weird singlet things that I didn't even know what they were called. And that was a little different. And that was like my sole understanding of wrestling. So I think some of it too was just that the families were just so genuinely like, our kids love this and this is so good for our kids. And then, you know, I mean, Henry came away, I think he had, you know, like a bloody mouth because he'd been out on the mats wrestling kind of thing. He's like, I want to do this. Like they were just hyped up, you know, kind of thing. We're like, okay.
They
were
like, pretty jacked up.
So yeah, I mean, they were just really excited about it. So, and a bunch of their friends were in it, or kids that they knew. And so it wasn't completely foreign to them. Yep. So
great. Yeah. Well, we are glad you pulled the trigger and that they had such a great experience at, I think probably the clinic was, would you say, the thing that put them over the edge? And
absolutely.
Yep. Great.
The clinic is huge. And I mean, even if you don't decide to do it, you will have everything right there in front of you, all of the tools, you know, as far as questions, you know, when you sat down, all of us new parents and said, this is kind of how everything works.
Right.
That was really big.
Yeah. And to fast forward, if for those of you that watch this a couple of weeks from now and you missed the clinic, reach out on our website. We will have some ways to still figure out if this is right for you. We have lots of resources on to answer all your questions, and there will be some preseason stuff going on for our more advanced kids. And so there will be some time prior to the start of the regular season practices to see what it's about, see what our kids are doing. So we'll be starting kind of around that MEA break time frame in the mid-October. So just reach out on if you're still curious about seeing what it is, let us know. So I want to dive into this. Tell us about, you know, one of the reasons I reached out to both you and both of you, Mike and Jessica, was just your story this last year, from the background that we've talked about in terms of the, you know, experience at the clinic to how you ended the season. We could talk for a couple hours on it. Yeah. And for those of you that want to find Mike and Jessica either at the clinic or this year, because it really is quite a cool story of the kids' journey last year and all. But tell us in, you know, the span of 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes here, guys, talk about the season that they had, and going from rookies to state participants at the NYWA State Folkstyle Tournament. And we can also talk a little bit about freestyle and Greco. Sure.
Well, I think, you know, we started out just doing some of the practices, and this was the novice practices for both Edward and Henry. Both of them seemed to be, I would like to think, catching on, you know, pretty quickly. Getting the right partners, obviously a big part of this, and the fact that some of the kids made great partners, wrestling partners for our boys. So they started out in the novice group, and we had a couple of the coaches that kind of came up to us afterwards and said, hey, you know, why don't you bring Edward, it started out with, bring him up to the other group and just see how he does with some of the more advanced kids.
Because he was a little bit older.
He's a little bit older, and you know, he seemed to be holding his own, I guess you would say. Maybe that's not the right word, but holding his own against some of the other kids that were his age. So we brought Edward up at first. Henry was still just doing the novice rookie stuff. Then January came along. The novice rookie part of it was kind of done with, and we were actually out at Jake's barn doing some stuff, and it was just Edward out there.
Well, we should say Edward was the one that we had brought to participate as a family of 4. Henry was there as well, but he was kind of, you know, over on the side, you know, not intending to participate. I mean, he literally was in khakis and a button-up shirt.
We thought Henry's season was done. He was in khakis and a button-up. He had just his socks on, and one of the younger kids who was in the more advanced group needed a wrestling partner, and they said, well, let's put Henry in, and Henry started wrestling around, and he had picked up a lot because even the rookie novice coaching staff has done such a phenomenal job that Henry was able to somewhat keep up with his wrestling partner. So we thought that, again, Henry's season was done because that was when the novice rookie thing was done. And he ended up actually joining the more advanced kids, even though he was in kindergarten. Yep. And just kind of progressed through things. We really didn't expect a whole lot, other than to just get more experience.
And we had done quite a few tournaments with the boys. Yeah. They wanted to, and so we would see, where is there a local tournament? How far do we want to drive? I mean, because this is all new to us, and we'd kind of ask around, like, anybody else going? Because the other aspect of that is that when you go to these tournaments with like a rookie novice and you don't necessarily go with the team, there's always kind of this like, well, then we're the coaches and I don't know what I'm doing, kind of thing. And Mike's a little bit rusty, even though he wrestled. And so there was a little bit of hesitation, but there's a pretty good circuit, I would say, where there's, we could kind of be like, oh, you're going to? Great. So that we can kind of navigate how tournaments work. Because there's an aspect of that can be a little overwhelming. Like, okay, once we get here, like with any sport, like, what's the rhythm of a tournament and where do you sign up and what are weigh-ins and skin checks and all those things that were unfamiliar to us. And so it was nice to have other parents that were navigating that system with us, where we could kind of have the buddy system. Like, are you going to Glencoe? Are you going to Annandale? Are you where are you going? So that we can, buddy up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a key thing in terms of if the kids these are for new parents. If you're listening back to this podcast, for the kids that really are ready for tournaments, just like Henry and Edward were, they're very, energetic. I feel like they, all kids kind of might struggle a little bit with social, emotional type things, but, anxieties. But once kids are ready to, do something competitive like that, the more tournaments they do, the more they will catch along a little bit faster and progress. And it's fun as well. And that's something great that you guys latched onto was finding those other parents, those other kids that were going to be there as well to navigate a 5-6 hour day, possibly. Now, did you go to a lot of the Min USA events, or were they kind of the more, show up, paper registration form, that type of stuff?
Mostly that type of stuff. The kids that had a couple of years experience that weren't doing the team, team wrestling. Yep. So,
and I think, just to, not lose sight of a point that you just made, like we had our fair share of tears and conversations. We can talk more about kind of the personal development aspect of wrestling, but it was very apparent in some of those tournaments. Like there were definitely kids that it was like, I do not know if they want to be here. And our kids always wanted to be there, even though in a match we might have tears or be upset about the outcome of it. Like it was always, when are we going to the next one? So, I mean, it was very led that way, I will say. And I think that's part of the success, is that we let the boys pace it out for themselves, whether they wanted to go to another tournament. And it wasn't, we very much kept checking in with them. Like, well, do you want to go to a tournament? Do you want to sign up for this one? And the answer was yes. And so we just kept making those opportunities.
And that's a parent knowing their kid situation. And we also, I think that's great that you guys did gain their feedback. I think some parents might fall into the trap of, well, yep, we're doing it. I signed you up. Like, oh, well, they're out there on the mat. They've got to be really got to be their decision, which I think is really cool about this sport, is that ownership, that empowerment that the kids build through this sport. It really is, the more you put in, the more you're going to get back. Sports are great on a macro level in that, but I think wrestling's so great in that it's such an individual, highly accountable sport that it's that magnified. So
I've never had so much pride as watching my boys go out and do as well as they did, and seeing the smile and the excitement on their face, knowing that they gave it their all.
Now, I will say that is a two-sided coin, because I will never forget watching Henry wrestle for the first time. He's about 5 feet from us, and he is looking at us. He's getting pinned, and he's just like pleading with his eyes for us to like basically rescue him. And we're like, ah!
But when he was done, he was smiling so much.
But it is a very,
in the moment. It's tough.
It's a roller.
Yeah.
It is a
Oh,
bit
yeah.
intense, but like anything can change in that moment. You go from getting pinned to, you know, possibly being on top, and then you're sky high. And so it is, I mean,
Yeah.
it is a little bit of a roller coaster at first. And I think that's maybe been a lesson we've had to bring along, is like, as excitable as we can get, like trying to be more metered so that we can deal with their roller coaster kind of thing. So
yeah. What, and you hit on it too, being proud, Mike, of the effort, right?
Yeah.
And
That's what it
that's
is. They
always, especially kids in their first year. It's going to be a tough road to even be above 500, you know, maybe even a 30% win record is your first year is maybe a pretty good accomplishment. But what we can control is effort, because the skill, the strength, you know, over time, more you put in hard work, the gaps can be closed quite fast. And so, but the effort and the attitude and these things that are in our control, you know, I listened to Ben Askren a lot. He runs probably one of the best private clubs in the country right now. And he was a 2008 Olympian, but he has a great sports psychology philosophy. And he talks about even he has a couple of daughters that are going through it. And he's like, my number one standard is to give great effort. That's what we're looking for. And the results, you know, you can't control that. But yeah, it's tough as parents, because we don't like watching our kids fail. But when we see them give great effort, knowing that they are doing everything in their control, that's what really gives us those goosebumps, right? And yeah, so tell us a little bit more about, so in that January, that late January to February timeframe, we're starting to train for the postseason tournaments. Edward and Henry are now part of the fold. They're, you know, part of that group of probably had about 40 to 50 kids training. And so I think they probably their first postseason tournament was at Delano. Is that correct?
I think so.
Or did you guys go to what?
No,
let's talk a little bit about the NYWA process.
It would have been Delano, I believe, and the other one was maybe Hutch. So Henry had qualified at Delano.
Yeah.
Edward.
I don't want to say injured. He did not qualify.
He did not qualify for that. So we go through Delano. Henry qualifies for the next one, which was in Waconia. Yeah. And we're like, we had zero expectations. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that we approached with Henry was that if you end up making it far enough in this tournament, you're not going to state, you're getting hotels and hot tubs. That is how we approached it with Henry, because that's what resonated in his mind. It's
pizza, like sleepover, we're all going to go.
It was all about the bonding experiences. It wasn't about going to state, and we never really mentioned you're going to state. So we didn't.
Because he probably doesn't even know what that means, right?
No, I had no idea.
You didn't have any conception of like what the gravity of that was.
We didn't.
And to be perfectly fair too, we were also navigating sibling dynamics of like Henry, qualified and Edward didn't, and Edward's the older brother. And there was this dynamic of like, they're both relatively athletic. And so Edward is used to kind of being like the older brother that does it all. And so we're also trying not to, to try to find line of like celebrating Henry's wins, but also helping Edward to still be excited and that he still had, an opportunity. And so we were trying to kind of thread that line. So
the good news was, and we didn't expect Henry to do what he did. So he wins his first one in Waconia, and we're like, okay, this is cool. That was more than what I was expecting. So he goes out and wins his second one. And I'm like, wow. And then we started looking at the bracket on our phone through Sports Engine, and things were starting to look up and up. And then we've got other parents and coaches that are like, did you see this? Did you see this? And we didn't even realize at that point in time that he was that close.
He was in the finals, or was he in the semifinals?
He was in the semifinals at that point. He won his semifinals and ended up qualifying for state. So we didn't even tell Henry at that point in time that you are one win away from going to state. We just it was just another wrestling match.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that approach, because, and I mean, there's this concept of a beginner's mind, right? Or beginner's mindset, where think about that. Henry's just focusing on, he's not looking up these kids' track wrestling profiles. He's not, oh, this kid, is blah, 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 beat. So he doesn't know. He's just focused on having fun, going out there, giving the best he can. And I love how you guys framed it in that if you do well, we'll take a trip to Rochester and have pizza and hot tubs and swimming.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because we had went to a few high school matches, weeks before that, and you could see he was emulating the high school kids, in the background, psyching themselves up, and which I had never seen before. The confidence level that Henry gained that weekend throughout the matches was just, it was fun to watch. I mean,
having talk about like home field advantage, right?
He was
because
pumped.
He had teammates. He had more than, being typical at an away where you might have, kind of a, who knows who's showing up at what tournament. So to be at Waconia, there was definitely an element of like having his teammates there wrestling and, cheering them on, and, the coaches and what have you. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And, the hard part with having two kids at times is we were also bouncing back and forth between his mat and Edward's mat. So it was at times kind of lost on us. We're just like, who's up next, kind of thing. And I'll just put one plug out there. We didn't even know about track wrestling until we were already done with the season. And if I can say anything to rookie parents, I would just say avoid it.
Yes.
Like, don't even go there. Like, we had no idea. And it was already a conversation with Edward at times where he's like talking to his opponents prior to, which is great sportsmanship. But he was like, they've been wrestling for, 4 years and there's no way I'm going to beat them. And so because we always preach to them, you never know. Like anything can change at any time. Like you always have an opportunity, like until you are done, there's always an opportunity. It's not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. The only benefit of track wrestling from just a match prep is just knowing where you're at in the bracket, just match numbers, right? Okay. I got to be on this mat, my bout number. Okay. But who you're wrestling should have no bearing on how you're going to wrestle that match, other than maybe you, if you have a coach or if you've done some scouting. This is even when you get to more higher levels on maybe forming a game plan, because there's video out there, but psyching yourself out as a parent or psyching your kid out that's never going to be a good recipe for success for anybody. And unfortunately, too many parents fall into that trap. So
I should say that we didn't use it as a tool for opponents, like a management tool to like get us where we needed to go.
Right.
But we were not aware and blissfully unaware that you could look up, what were the stats on your opponent. Like that was never.
Yep. Well, good on you for helping with that. I think that's a great thing you both did. And for those backing up of what tournaments we're talking about for NYWA, NYWA is a state association. There's two associations, primarily in Minnesota. NYWA is, and then there's Min USA, which is affiliated with USA Wrestling. We participate in both organizations. And so to qualify for the Waconia regional, you had to do one of the district qualifiers and get first or second, or if there wasn't enough kids then everybody got flyers to attend the regionals. And so at the regional, top three in each bracket, each weight class, age grade, and weight made it to the NYWA state tournament with bracket of 16 kids. So that's what Henry ended up doing. And then both the fun thing about NYWA that I really like is fall a little bit short of the actual qualification for the state individual tournament. There is a state invite tournament that is a little bit more of a quasi open tournament. They give the 4th through 6th place kids, I think, get preference on making the brackets. And then if there's space left over, they create more openings in those brackets. And so I think, Henry made it in the kindergarten 55-pound bracket to state, bracket of 16 kids. And then Edward did the state invite tournament. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about that whole experience?
Edward qualified for the invitational. So our experience with that was interesting because it was going on the same time as what Henry was wrestling. And I wish I had pictures right now, because there's a picture out there of Coach Voss and Eddie sitting down where they could actually watch Henry wrestle in totally different buildings.
They're using electronics
They're using
to basically
electronics
watch Henry
to watch.
wrestle in the other room.
Exactly. So
Oh, sweet.
Henry would wrestle, Eddie would watch him on the electronics, and then we'd run from one part of the stadium in Rochester to the next to help with Eddie. Edward ended up doing pretty well down there. He ended up 4th at the Invitational, did a fantastic job. That was our biggest challenge, was just having 2 boys we put on miles that day running back and forth, trying to help out with.
Got your steps in, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and big kudos to the staff and to you guys too, because that was part of the management of it, was kind of like, if we ended up with kind of an overlap, we knew that somebody would be helping to support getting, our wrestler prepped or ready or where they needed to go, so that we can kind of, flow.
There's always support, whether it be a coach or another parent.
Well, at the especially I think as we get from regionals to state, our coaching staff's philosophy is it's a stressful enough time for the kids, and we want to make sure that we are there as coaches in their corners, a little bit more on the line, but still it's all fun. It's all part of the process. For us to help, and we are blessed to be able to do that with a great coaching staff, to be in every kid's corner, especially from regionals on up at most tournaments. We do both Min USA and NYWA qualification, and they're all, basically from late February through the end of April. Every weekend we're oversubscribed. But anyway, so at state though, we think it's really important for us as a program to have coaches. We have some paid coaches. We have mostly our coaches are volunteers to be in the kids' corners. And so we do a big investment in that. And I think it's turned out, pretty good. I'm glad to hear you guys' appreciation on that, because I don't think every program does it like that. And so talk a little bit about how that really helped the kids, you think, go through this cycle.
One of the other things too that I also wish I had a picture so we could pull up, when Henry was doing his last match down at state. So you and Coach Voss, you've got high schoolers, you've got 7th graders, 8th graders, 4th graders, around a kindergartner. That's how much support. It was all the way from high school down. It was just a big circle of nothing but positive enforcement for Henry before he went out for his last match. And that is, I don't think you find that in football, where you're going to have a high schooler who has just as much care and investment as you do a parent or a coach or, a 7th grade. Just that is what I thought was so cool about. It doesn't matter that you're a kindergartner. You are a wrestler for Waconia, and you are going to have everybody there backing you up. All of the parents who we really didn't know all that well at that point in time, who took their time to come out and watch Henry and Eddie. That was huge for us to have that much support. And it wasn't just the coaches. It was everybody. And
I think that to add on to that, I was thinking about that same memory. And I think there's another one too, as we got kind of even past that into later sessions and getting into different types of wrestling and whatnot. There were sessions where our boys didn't always, or practice sessions where our boys didn't always have great partners, just because there wasn't the kids to kind of maybe we didn't quite have a weight matchup or a skill matchup. And so there was a particular instance where Edward didn't really have a great partner, and there was some threesomes kind of, going around, and he was kind of on the wall. And some of the older kids took it upon themselves. They're like, hey, Eddie, get in here and we'll make sure that you can wrestle. And that to me as a parent was so heartwarming and so indicative of the culture of the program, because it didn't take a coach to recognize that somebody needed to be maybe included a little bit more, or that, they needed to take it upon themselves. And that's really what I think what Mike was kind of alluding to, too, with, this whole age spectrum of support, where unlike any other sport we've played, where, you might have older siblings at your baseball games, but you're all the same relative age. And you get this vast spectrum of support from older kids and the mentoring that comes along. And we can talk about the fact that we went to town baseball games all summer, and we'd look over and Henry is wrestling in the grass, with his older teammates.
6th, 7th, 8th grader.
And they're wrestling, they're being very cognizant to thankfully not hurt him, and to, kind of, and also to just let him maul them, because he's going full at it in his, Henry way kind of thing. So I think it's just the family of wrestling has really taken our hearts with just how invested everyone is, other parents, other coaches, other kids, and that really is just so evident in everyone's approach and in the culture you guys have developed.
We've gained a ton of friends just from the wrestling program this year. We kind of felt like outsiders, not originally being from Waconia. But since we've joined wrestling, I mean, we have a really good group of what I would consider to be friends now, not just, other kids' parents, but just friends that you can hang out with. And, it is a big bonding experience. It's for the parents, everybody.
So true. We're so blessed, right? I think in our community in Waconia, but even beyond that, I see the wrestling community itself is really unique in that appreciation for all the tough things we've kind of talked about in terms of navigating the sport, how much sacrifice is required. People, understand that, right? But also there are so many good people in it, and it allows, I could say it this way, like I think what you're saying, it allows for deeper relationships than maybe some of these other sports, just because of how it's built. And like you said, I think a lot of it is, maybe a big part of it is that it's not just first, second grade wrestling, and that's all it's we have economies of scale because of that's how we practice. What you might be practicing with, as long as you have a kid that's your weight, your skill, it doesn't really matter if you're 2-3 years apart.
Nope.
Because you can't grow in this sport without good partners, among other things. And so that's how a lot of our practices are built. That's how just the sport itself is built. And I think we're really blessed. Like you hit on it. We've always kind of had that culture in Waconia where we kind of pay it forward, pass it, pass the baton on in terms of leadership. And there's a lot of responsibility that our older kids at the high school level have to being not only good people first. Yeah. And if I'm a good wrestler, great, but we want to be a good student. We want to be a good person, and hopefully a good wrestler to boot. But I appreciate you guys attesting to that. And that's, I'm glad that you're on the train now. So hoping we can get more and more on the train this fall, and, even deepening our relationships for those that are already part of the fold.
We can't speak highly enough. Really can't.
Appreciate it.
You said the community too, and I can't remember his name. Maybe you'll remember, but Henry had a buddy, because when you go to these tournaments, you end up, strangely enough, it doesn't really matter how far flung they are, kind of seeing the same wrestlers, because it's their weight and their class kind of thing. And so you're like, oh yeah, we recognize you. We've wrestled you a couple times. And so Henry had a buddy. Do you know who he is? But anyways, Henry had a buddy that they wanted to wrestle each other at state. There was like no adversarial. They're like, oh, I hope I get to wrestle you kind of thing. And like, they were genuinely sad when they didn't their bracket didn't, end up working out where they got to wrestle each other. And they were there wrestling cheering each other on during their matches. And I can't remember where they're from at this moment. I don't remember either. But so that was really cool that just, that they recognize each other from other tournaments. And there was none of this aspect of like,
the adversarial, you're my opponent. It's
nothing like that.
The heart, they're kids, and they'll try their best against each other, but they, it's. I think it's also the sportsmanship piece of it too. That breeds that, but I think it's also just there's an inherent camaraderie, right? That's built
very much.
I've seen it across dual teams that are formed in the off season where we have, statewide, freestyle or some that there's some folk style dual teams that are formed across, maybe from a Min USA perspective or whatever. And these kids become super good friends for long periods of time, and they might be opponents fighting for a state title. They end up just that. I think that level of mutual respect really, it's just hard to explain, but it breeds itself in the sport, doesn't it?
Right.
It does. And I think that's, when one of the questions of like, what have they gained off the mat? And I'll, we've talked kind of a little bit about, Henry's journey as a kindergartner and these low expectations that, then he's, at state kind of thing. But I think where I have been so pleased with the kind of the development that wrestling brought to the mat or to like kind of the spectrum was just really in some of the development with Edward, because I think in some respects Henry's a little bit young enough where he's like he definitely wants to win and he's upset if he doesn't, but he kind of shakes it off a little faster. Where he's like, okay, I went out, I wrestled, I did my best, and if I didn't win,
short memory.
Yes. Which I think is actually that works in his advantage in some respects. But Edward, there was a lot of conversation because losing is so hard. There is no, I did my best and my teammate, like there's no passing the buck. It is just, and that is hard. It is hard and it is physical. So when you lose, it is not because you didn't make a catch 50 feet away from some other kid. Like you lost up close and personal. And so that was hard. And we had lots of conversation with Edward and, and at times like, do you still want to do this? Cause he'd be really upset at times. But that personal aspect of giving him the autonomy to determine, does he still want to do this? Does he still enjoy this? Do you still like this, buddy? If you're not having fun, we do not have to do this. Like this should not be something that you don't enjoy kind of thing. But also that token of working through like, it sometimes you lose, and then having in the later part of the season, there was times where he's like, that kid beat me, at the early tournament, blah, blah, blah. And like the high of like that his skills had improved and recognizing it's not a foregone conclusion. Any match is up for grabs. You never know who's going to win and that you just have to go hard till the very end.
I think the confidence between the beginning of the season and the end of the season that both boys gained, personal confidence gained, was huge. That's probably one of my coolest, proudest dad moments is how much confidence they gained in themselves.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. And I think as the kids, what I love about Edward's journey is he wants to win. He wants that. He wants to work, and he works hard too. I think if he can put two and two together on working smarter and harder, mastering these techniques, he's just basically a couple of techniques, perfections away, or just improvements away from do this, kind of problem solving. Like the reason maybe you're getting scored on is because maybe we're not sprawling right or something like that. As an example. And we can, for him, we're kind of getting a little bit of a coaching one-on-one here, but I feel like it's very, kids will eventually hit a barrier or kind of a little bit of a plateau wherever they're at, and multiple plateaus, hopefully. And so it's a matter of there's some problem that they need to solve to get to the next plateau. And sometimes as they get to the next level, they climb this, Mount Everest, as I like to say, it's, the common recipe is hard work and problem solving and just improving, whether it's strength, stamina, cardio, technique. The technique piece is so detailed in this sport. But that's what makes it great, is that you're never a finished product. Even you listen to interviews post-match of those at the highest level in the Olympics, the world championship level, they're thinking about, I could have done this a little bit better. I need to work on that still. I think having that mindset, but not being too hard on yourself is the way to go. And I'm looking forward to work with the kids more this year on it, and or at least our coaching staff doing that as well. So,
then seeing them learn like when they first implement something that high as a parent, where you're like, oh, you did it! Like we've watched you practice and you nailed it.
Right. I think the other part of that, and this goes back to a lot of the coaching staff, is it's not, third grade is not too late to start wrestling. Fourth grade is not too late to start wrestling, because with Eddie having this as his first year and seeing what he started like at the beginning of the year and being able to qualify for the state invitational in his first year goes back to how well of coaching. I mean, a kid has to be coachable, but at the same time, you guys coaching him the way that you did helped him along his journey to where we felt like he belonged there, even though this was his first year. And, you know, it was, like I said, third grade is not too late. Fourth grade is not too late, because you guys recognize what to do and how to make the improvements that you need to get them up to speed pretty quick.
And good
Well, I
teammates.
appreciate that.
Teammates. Yeah. Yes.
That's a total team effort, right? And we appreciate the kudos, and blessed with good coaches as well. And it's a never ending process, but the process is so important. And for those that can fall in love with the process, they're going to have a really fun and exciting career.
Mhm.
And it's fun for us as parents to be able to watch the character growth of the kids that way. Did you see some things off the mat that, you know, whether it's in the classroom or, you know, some of these other principles that the kids, you know, grew from?
I think problem solving a little bit better.
Yep.
You know, you have to problem solve on the mat. If you're getting pinned, you have to problem solve how to get out of that. Where in the classroom, you know, you have to, and that's the other thing with wrestling, you have to make quick judgments to get somebody pinned or points, and I think that also helped them in the classroom too, is making those quick decisions and making the right decisions have benefited both ways, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I would say perseverance. You know, this
Yeah.
idea of that, you know, there are certain aspects of their academic life that come very easy to them, and then there's other aspects that don't. And so not getting frustrated when you don't nail something the first time, you know, well, I'm not good at that. And it's like, no, you need to
Right.
practice at that, and you need to stick with it. And it's not always going to be easy the first time. And so I think, like Mike said, having, you know, seeing the development over the course of the season, having those wins, both like metaphorical and, you know, kind of realistic wins kind of thing, seeing those that we could hearken back to that in other aspects and be like, but remember when you didn't give up and you got that reversal at the end and you didn't see it coming and you beat the guy that beat you before, like that's why we don't give up. That's why we always give our best effort. That's why we, you know, don't get in our head. So like some of those aspects I think translate just to anything you're attempting in life, be it, you know, academic or sport related. So
yeah, I think you're tapping into the growth versus fixed mindset piece.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
for those that, and there's probably an infinite amount of times I've said this of, oh yeah, I'm going to do another podcast about that. But I do want to do Mindset is a book, one of my favorite books. I don't know if I have it in here. This is my shared office with my wife. This is mostly, but we have a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck that was introduced. It's been written, I think it was written at least 10 years ago, maybe more than that. But it's the concept of, you know, you can, with skill and hard work equals, you know, growth. You can master something through those things. You're not just set to be fixed in, oh, I'm not good at math, like you said. Nope. You gotta develop the skills with hard work, and you can progress. Not to say that it's not going to be easy, right? But it's possible.
Absolutely.
And there's not a cop-out opportunity. Like we're not just going to blanket say, I'm not good at that, so I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, that's not an option.
Yeah. So sports psychology, we're going to put that on the shelf of more topics we're going to dive into. Oops, sorry, I did that preemptively. But yeah, I think we're almost an hour in, but we've had such a great conversation, guys. Any additional things to wrap up? If you're, you know, for those of you that listen to this podcast, whether it's this week or tomorrow, or what have you, what advice do you have for, you know, either new parents or just those parents in general that are in the wrestling realm?
My biggest bit of advice would be get involved. You know, if you have questions, ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, because any of the other parents or coaches that are out there are there to help you. There's no dumb questions. If the coaching staff, if the parents, if we don't have the answers, we'll find the right answers. But there is, just ask the questions, you know, how the process works between just the practices. If you want to go to your first tournament, don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, I will be around all night tomorrow night. Jessica will be there as well. And we are very approachable, along with the other wrestling family. I mean, it is one big family, and I can't stress that enough, that it's more than just a team. It is a family. And it's something that, I mean, I think it is definitely a huge part of our lives now, that it will be for a long time. This isn't just a 1 year and done. We're in it and it's not even the long haul. I mean, we just enjoy it that much. It's fun. It's just fun.
Yeah, I would definitely say, I was going to 100% say, don't be afraid to ask. And even like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, my kid wants to go, but I'm not sure that I can be there, or I don't feel comfortable coaching, or my kid doesn't want me to coach. Like, don't be afraid to ask someone else if they're going, like, are you cool? Like, or do you know this, more kind of thing. So never be afraid to ask for help. And I am completely blown away how quickly we fell in love as a family. Like, we knew nothing. We knew no one. We had no idea what we were talking about. It was like a foreign language at the beginning, and it just feels like it has the friendships we've gained, how far we've come along. It's like, well, we've had to have been doing this for years, because we just feel so taken in and welcomed. So we hope to be able to extend that to other people that are interested in the sport.
Well, we appreciate that. And I think that's a great advice, and that we are blessed with, both of you, but we have great resources in the program. Coaching staff of almost 20 at the youth level. And, we had over 120 kids last year. So multiply that times parents, with probably about, on average, we have a pretty high retention rate of about 70%. So, for those that have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Great folks like Mike and Jessica here and the coaching staff will guide you along the way. So, all right. Well, guys, I really appreciate you joining us tonight. It's been a super fun discussion. This is our first of our parent series, and I'm hoping to do more and more of them. And maybe we'll have you guys back again. It's been a great discussion. It'd be great to even have like a panel discussion of more parents. And I think around the time of when tournaments are happening and starting to happen, we could definitely do even a more of a tutorial, how to survive, what to expect. So,
keep your kids from bouncing off of chairs at state tournaments. That's probably the best advice that I could give, because it gets really expensive. But no, I think one more piece. You might think that your kid's not the most coordinated person. You might think that they're not going to make it. I mean, there is no kid out there, as far as I'm concerned, that shouldn't try it. Based on abilities. There's no such thing as not having abilities with wrestling.
Well, it's such a complementary sport to any other sport out there. To have the wrestling mentality and the lessons we learned from the sport will only help you. The grit, the toughness, the perseverance, right? The list goes on. So,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And for those, don't forget to click like, and we really want to build up our subscriber numbers. So do that out there, share that with your friends, family, and click notification bell so that when we're live, you'll get notified. So anyway, with that said, appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. I hope to see many of you tomorrow at the clinic. I know we'll see the cooks. Until then, take care, everyone. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks again.